What if everything you believe about your mind and free will is just an illusion? Imagine that the very way you think, feel, and react isn't entirely under your control, but is being subtly manipulated by forces beyond your understanding. Today, we're diving deep into a chilling world of covert government experiments and hidden agendas. This isn't your everyday conspiracy theory. We're talking about an FBI document that exposes how your mind can be controlled, connected to one of the most notorious programs ever, MKUltra. For decades, whispers and rumors have swirled around secret projects that pushed the limits of science and human consciousness. What if the techniques used to control your thoughts weren't just figments of a paranoid imagination, but were based on real experiments conducted under the highest levels of secrecy? In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA's MKUltra program was at the center of a storm of mind control experiments so controversial that they were shrouded in layers of deception and classified information. And now, an FBI document has shed even more light on these practices, suggesting that the scope of government manipulation might be far wider than we ever imagined. This video will take you on an investigative journey, exploring everything from the historical roots of these experiments to the science behind how our minds can be influenced. We'll break down complex ideas into everyday language, revealing how secret projects like MKUltra not only challenged our understanding of human potential, but also paved the way for modern theories about mind control and behavioral manipulation. Prepare yourself for a wild ride that blurs the line between science, spirituality, and conspiracy. We're going to peel back the layers of history and expose the reality behind government mind control. Along the way, we'll look at eye-opening documents, intriguing theories, and even some of the more unbelievable claims that have surfaced over the years. Whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, this journey will leave you questioning what you think you know about the power of the mind and who, or what, is really in control. So get comfortable, keep an open mind, and let's explore a world where nothing is quite what it seems. To understand how your mind can be controlled, we need to start with the time when secrecy was the order of the day. Picture the Cold War era, a period defined by paranoia, fierce competition between nations, and a desperate race to gain any advantage over your adversary. In this charged atmosphere, governments went to extreme lengths to develop technologies and techniques that could give them an edge, even if that meant pushing ethical boundaries. MKUltra was born out of this environment. Initiated in the early 1950s by the CIA, the program was designed to explore and exploit the hidden capabilities of the human mind. At its core, MKUltra aimed to understand how to manipulate thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to serve national security interests. It wasn't just about gathering intelligence, it was about controlling people. The stakes were high, and so were the risks. Researchers experimented with everything from drugs like LSD to sensory deprivation and hypnosis, trying to unlock a secret recipe for brainwashing and mind control. Now, you might be wondering, how does the FBI document fit into all of this? While MKUltra was officially run by the CIA, various government agencies, including the FBI, kept a close eye on the developments. Over time, declassified documents have revealed that multiple agencies were either involved in or aware of these experiments. The FBI document we're focusing on today is one of those rare pieces of evidence that hint at a broader, more sinister agenda. It suggests that the methods used in MKUltra were not isolated experiments, but part of a larger pattern of psychological manipulation, one that has evolved over the decades. During the height of the Cold War, the fear of communism and the threat of nuclear annihilation created an atmosphere where anything seemed possible, especially when it came to controlling the human mind. Governments worldwide were desperate to find ways to counter enemy tactics, which included exploring unconventional warfare strategies. In such a climate, the line between scientific innovation and ethical abuse was often blurred. The secret experiments conducted under MKUltra were not publicized. Instead, they were hidden away in locked files, known only to a handful of high-ranking officials. Yet the implications of these experiments have echoed through the decades, sparking debates about personal freedom, government oversight, and the very nature of human consciousness. In addition to government paranoia, the cultural landscape of the 1960s played a significant role. The counterculture movement questioned authority and conventional wisdom, and many began to wonder if the government was hiding something much darker. Stories of mind control, altered states of consciousness, and secret experiments spread like wildfire. Whether true or exaggerated, these tales captured the public's imagination, feeding into a growing distrust of institutions. As the layers of classified documents were gradually peeled back, the once impossible idea that the government might be experimenting with your mind became a tantalizing possibility. Imagine stepping into a hidden world where the rules of ethics, science, and human rights are thrown out the window in the name of national security. This is the unsettling realm of MK-Ultra, a secret government program that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with the human mind. Over the next few thousand words, we're going to take a deep dive into this controversial program, exploring its origins, the wild experiments it spawned, and the eerie legacy it left behind. Buckle up, because this journey is as fascinating as it is disturbing. For starters, MK-Ultra wasn't just a short-lived project confined to a few backroom experiments. It was an expansive, multifaceted program that stretched over many years and involved countless experiments. Born in the early 1950s, MK-Ultra was launched by the CIA as part of its efforts to develop techniques for mind control, interrogation, and behavioral modification. At a time when the Cold War was in full swing and paranoia was at an all-time high, the idea of being able to control an enemy's mind, or even your own, was a tantalizing prospect. Governments were desperate to find any edge that could tip the scales in their favor, and MK-Ultra was their answer to that challenge. The program was shrouded in secrecy from the very beginning. Official records were classified, and even within the government, only a handful of top officials knew the full extent of what was going on. The researchers behind MK-Ultra were given carte blanche to experiment with various methods, often pushing the limits of what was considered acceptable. They weren't shy about using extreme measures. Everything from potent hallucinogens to grueling sensory deprivation techniques was on the table. One of the most infamous methods employed by MK-Ultra was the use of LSD. In a time when the psychedelic was still largely unregulated, the CIA saw it as a potential tool for breaking down the human psyche. Subjects were given high doses of LSD, sometimes without their consent or even their knowledge, in the hope that the drug could strip away their mental defenses and leave them open to suggestion. The results were unpredictable. While some subjects experienced brief windows of altered consciousness, others were left with long-term psychological scars. It was as if the researchers were playing with fire, unaware of the full consequences of their experiments. But LSD was just the tip of the iceberg. MK-Ultra also delved into the realm of sensory deprivation. Imagine being isolated in a room with no light, no sound, and no human contact for extended periods. In such conditions, the mind can begin to unravel. Researchers believed that by cutting off all external stimuli, they could create a state of mental vulnerability, a blank slate where new ideas could be more easily implanted. The subjects of these experiments often reported vivid hallucinations and an eerie sense of disconnection from reality, a state that, in theory, could be exploited for interrogation or behavior modification. Hypnosis was another tool in the MK-Ultra arsenal. The idea was simple. If you could put someone into a deep hypnotic state, you might be able to access their subconscious and implant suggestions that would alter their behavior long after the session was over. There were experiments where trained hypnotists attempted to rewire a person's thought patterns, to make them more compliant, or to erase certain memories entirely. The combination of chemical agents like LSD, sensory deprivation, and hypnosis created a cocktail of techniques that was as potent as it was ethically dubious. Key figures in the MK Ultra program emerged as both masterminds and enigmas. One name that looms large is that of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the man often credited with running the entire operation. Gottlieb was known for his ruthless pursuit of scientific breakthroughs, regardless of the human cost. Under his watch, MK Ultra evolved from a fringe experiment into a full-blown government project. His willingness to experiment on unwitting subjects, including military personnel, college students, and even members of the general public, has cemented his reputation as a symbol of government overreach and moral bankruptcy. The program wasn't limited to a single location or institution either. Research took place in secret labs, often tucked away in remote parts of the country, far from the prying eyes of the media and the public. Some experiments were conducted in collaboration with universities and hospitals, institutions that were later shocked to learn that their names had been linked to covert government research. The murkiness of these collaborations only added to the aura of conspiracy that surrounded MK Ultra. As the years went by, the scope of MK Ultra began to expand. It wasn't just about testing drugs or inducing altered states. It was about understanding the very nature of human consciousness. Researchers wanted to know how deep the rabbit hole went. Could the human mind be completely reprogrammed? Could it be transformed into a weapon or even a tool of the state? The more they experimented, the more questions emerged. Every new test seemed to unlock a door to an even more unsettling possibility. One of the more disturbing aspects of MK Ultra was the use of unwitting subjects. In many cases, individuals were drawn into these experiments without ever being told what was happening to them. Some were told they were participating in harmless research on stress or memory, only to later discover that their entire experience had been manipulated. The lack of informed consent wasn't just a violation of personal rights. It was a blatant disregard for human dignity. This secrecy and deception fueled widespread outrage once details of the program began to leak out. The timeline of MK Ultra is as tangled as the experiments themselves. For years, the program operated in the shadows, with only whispers of its existence making their way into the public domain. It wasn't until the 1970s, when a series of congressional investigations began to pry open the government's tightly sealed files, that the true extent of MK Ultra started to come to light. As documents were declassified, researchers, journalists, and the public were confronted with a litany of experiments that painted a grim picture of state-sponsored mind control. The revelations sparked fierce debates over the ethics of government research and the balance between national security and individual rights. Despite the controversy, many of the techniques developed under MK Ultra have had a lasting impact. Some of the ideas that once seemed like science fiction have gradually seeped into mainstream research. Concepts like neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to new stimuli, have become accepted scientific fact. Similarly, the use of sensory deprivation as a tool for psychological research has been refined and is now used in controlled settings to study the human mind. However, the shadow of MK Ultra looms large over these developments. Even as we make progress in understanding the brain, the dark legacy of these experiments serves as a stark reminder of the potential for abuse when science is used for manipulation rather than enlightenment. What makes MK Ultra even more compelling is how it taps into some of our deepest fears and fantasies about the human mind. The idea that someone, or something, could control your thoughts, alter your memories, or even dictate your behavior is a nightmare scenario for many. It's a theme that has found its way into countless movies, books, and TV shows, blurring the line between fact and fiction. While many of these depictions are dramatized for entertainment, they often echo the real-life horrors of MK Ultra, amplifying our collective unease about the limits of free will. Yet, despite the widespread condemnation of MK Ultra, there are still those who argue that some of its more controversial techniques could have beneficial applications if used responsibly. Proponents of controlled psychedelic therapy, for example, point to modern research suggesting that substances like LSD and psilocybin can have profound therapeutic effects when administered in a controlled, clinical setting. They argue that if we can learn from the mistakes of MK Ultra, we might be able to harness some of these techniques to treat mental health issues, trauma, or addiction. Of course, this is a slippery slope. What begins as therapeutic research could, in the wrong hands, become a tool of manipulation once again. One of the most eye-opening revelations about MK Ultra is how little we still know about the full extent of the program. Many of the records were either destroyed or remain heavily redacted, leaving gaps in our understanding of just how many experiments were conducted and what their long-term effects might have been. Some whistleblowers and former participants have come forward over the years, sharing their harrowing stories and providing a glimpse into a world that most of us can only imagine. Their accounts are as varied as they are chilling. Stories of individuals whose lives were irrevocably altered by experiments they never consented to, of minds pushed to the brink, and of a system that seemed to care little about the human cost. For those who want to understand MK Ultra, it's important to view it not just as a series of isolated experiments, but as part of a broader pattern of state-sponsored research into human behavior. The techniques developed under MK Ultra didn't just vanish when the program was officially terminated. They evolved, influencing later research in psychology, neuroscience, and even computer science. Some modern theories about behavioral manipulation and mass persuasion can trace their roots back to the dark experiments of MK Ultra. Whether it's the idea that our environment can be manipulated to control our actions, or that subtle shifts in sensory input can radically alter our perceptions. The legacy of MK Ultra is woven into the fabric of contemporary thought. It's also worth noting the sheer audacity of the program. In a time when public trust in government was already fragile, the very existence of MK Ultra, its willingness to experiment on unknowing citizens, was a betrayal on a massive scale. The program wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was a stark reminder of what can happen when those in power decide that the end justifies the means. The implications go far beyond the experiments themselves. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions about accountability, transparency, and the limits of government authority. Even decades after its supposed demise, MK Ultra continues to capture our imagination. The whispers of mind control, the notion that our thoughts could be hijacked by unseen forces, persist in popular culture. Every time a new document is declassified or a former participant steps forward, the public is reminded of how easily science can be twisted into a tool of control. And while many of the more extreme claims about MK Ultra remain unverified or the subject of heated debate, the core message is clear. Our minds are vulnerable, and the power to control them is something that governments, and perhaps even private entities, might one day harness again. In exploring MK Ultra, we're not just delving into the annals of Cold War history, we're peering into the dark corners of human potential and the dangerous intersection of science and power. The experiments carried out under MK Ultra challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. They force us to confront the uncomfortable reality that, in the wrong hands, scientific inquiry can become a weapon, one that attacks the very essence of our individuality. What's even more chilling is that many of the techniques once used in MK Ultra are now being revisited, albeit under the guise of modern research into mental health and neurotechnology. The tools of sensory manipulation, hypnotic suggestion, and even psychedelic therapy have evolved, but the core principles remain the same. Today, as we debate the ethics of brain-computer interfaces and digital manipulation of information, the shadow of MK Ultra serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that every breakthrough in understanding the brain carries with it the potential for both healing and harm. In the end, the story of MKUltra is one of both marvel and horror, a testament to human ingenuity and its darker impulses. It's a story of ambition unchecked by moral restraint, of scientific curiosity that turned into an instrument of control. And while the full truth about MKUltra may forever be lost to secrecy and redacted files, its legacy endures in the questions it raises about free will, the limits of human consciousness, and the power structures that seek to shape our reality. As we piece together the fragments of this troubled history, we're left with more questions than answers. How many lives were changed forever by these experiments? What lasting effects, both seen and unseen, have they had on the people involved and on society as a whole? And most importantly, are we truly free in our thoughts, or is there a hidden hand guiding us from the shadows? These are the questions that continue to haunt the legacy of MKUltra, a legacy that is as much about the fragility of the human mind as it is about the relentless pursuit of power. By diving deep into the MKUltra program, we begin to understand that the quest for control over the human mind is not a relic of the past. It's an ongoing struggle, one that forces us to confront the very nature of freedom and autonomy. The experiments of MKUltra may have been conducted under the banner of national security, but they left behind a trail of moral and ethical quandaries that we are still grappling with today. And as we move further into an era where technology and neuroscience continue to merge, the lessons of MKUltra serve as a stark reminder. With great knowledge comes great responsibility, and the power to shape minds is a force that must be wielded with utmost care. So as we close this extended look into MKUltra, remember that this isn't just a story about government secrets or Cold War paranoia. It's a window into the very real and sometimes terrifying possibilities of mind control. It's a reminder that our minds, the very core of who we are susceptible to forces both seen and unseen. And while the history of MKUltra is shrouded in mystery and controversy, its implications are clear. The ability to manipulate thought is one of the most dangerous powers of all. In the end, the tale of MKUltra challenges us to remain ever vigilant about who controls the narrative of our lives. It urges us to question authority, to demand transparency, and to always guard the sanctity of our own minds. As we continue to explore the frontiers of science and technology, let the story of MKUltra serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the search for power over others must never come at the expense of our own freedom. And that's the deep dive into MKUltra, a journey through a labyrinth of experimentation, secrecy, and the relentless pursuit of controlling the human mind. While we may never have all the answers, understanding this history is the first step in ensuring that the mistakes of the past are not repeated in the future. Imagine stumbling upon a dusty file in a government archive, one that holds the secrets of decades-long experiments into the human mind. That's exactly what the FBI document we're examining feels like. A hidden piece of evidence that ties together strands of Cold War paranoia, clandestine research, and a terrifying quest to control the human psyche. In this extended analysis, we're going to dissect this document from every angle, what it claims, how it fits into the broader narrative of mind control experiments like MKUltra, and the deeper implications it carries for our understanding of government power and the vulnerabilities of the human mind. At first glance, the document is dense and technical. It's written in the kind of bureaucratic language that can be impenetrable, but as we break it down, its disturbing message becomes all too clear. The FBI document outlines a series of experiments that were not only designed to alter human behavior, but to fundamentally reshape the way the mind processes reality. It details methods that range from chemical interventions and sensory manipulation to advanced techniques that border on the experimental fringes of neuroscience. While some of these claims may sound like the stuff of science fiction, the document is backed by declassified files and corroborative accounts from other government sources, giving it a weight that's hard to dismiss. One of the key points the document emphasizes is the concept of state-induced suggestibility. According to the text, under certain conditions, especially when subjects are placed in controlled environments that limit their sensory input or overwhelm them with chemical agents, the human mind becomes incredibly malleable. In these states, individuals are more susceptible to suggestion, making it possible to implant ideas, alter memories, or even overwrite personality traits. The document goes into detail about experiments where subjects, after being dosed with high amounts of psychoactive substances like LSD, exhibited behaviors that were radically different from their baseline states. These altered states were not just fleeting moments of confusion. In some cases, the effects lasted for days, weeks, or even permanently altered aspects of the subject's identities. Delving deeper into the technical aspects, the FBI document categorizes the experiments into several phases, each with its own objectives and methodologies. In the initial phase, the focus was on establishing a baseline of human suggestibility. Researchers would expose subjects to various stimuli, ranging from controlled sensory deprivation environments to high-intensity sensory bombardments, and meticulously document the changes in behavior and perception. The document describes the use of control groups and experimental groups, though it's important to note that many of these experiments did not adhere to what we now consider ethical standards. Instead, the primary goal was to observe how radically human behavior could be manipulated when the mind was forced into an altered state. As the experiments progressed, the document reveals that researchers began combining techniques to amplify their effects. For instance, in one particularly chilling series of tests, subjects were first placed in isolation tanks to induce sensory deprivation, then administered a cocktail of chemicals designed to break down psychological resistance, and finally subjected to hypnotic suggestion sessions. The cumulative effect of these techniques was described as a profound disruption of the subject's normal cognitive functions, rendering them highly vulnerable to implanted suggestions. The language used in the document is clinical and detached, yet the implications are anything but benign. The document notes that some subjects were later found to have difficulty distinguishing between implanted memories and their own life experiences, a clear indication that these experiments didn't just temporarily alter behavior, they might have permanently rewritten the fabric of a person's consciousness. One of the most fascinating and disturbing parts of the document is its discussion of frequency modulation in the context of brain waves. The text suggests that by manipulating the electromagnetic frequencies around a subject's brain, it was possible to further destabilize normal thought patterns. This idea, which resonates with modern theories about the brain's plasticity and its responsiveness to external stimuli, was being explored long before the advent of current neurotechnologies. The document outlines experiments in which subjects were exposed to carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulses designed to synchronize or disrupt normal brain rhythms. The result was an increased susceptibility to suggestion and a temporary erasure of personal identity markers. Although these methods were still in their infancy at the time, the fact that government researchers were experimenting with such techniques raises profound questions about the lengths to which authorities were willing to go in their pursuit of control. The document also spends considerable time discussing the concept of cognitive reprogramming. This term refers to the process of intentionally altering a person's thought patterns and behaviors through repeated, targeted interventions. The FBI file describes protocols in which subjects were subjected to long-term conditioning regimens involving repeated exposure to both chemical agents and psychological stressors. The goal was not merely to induce a temporary state of suggestibility, but to fundamentally rewire the brain's processing pathways so that even after the experiments ended, the subjects would continue to exhibit the desired behaviors or beliefs. In one example, the document recounts how a subject's aggressive tendencies were not only heightened during the experiment, but seemed to persist long after the testing was concluded, suggesting that the reprogramming had achieved a lasting impact. This raises significant ethical concerns, as it implies that these techniques could potentially be used to create individuals who are permanently altered, essentially stripping them of their free will. Critics of the document often point to potential exaggerations or misinterpretations of the data. Some skeptics argue that the language used in these declassified files is intentionally opaque, perhaps to obscure the true nature of the experiments from prying eyes. However, supporters of the document's authenticity note that its contents are consistent with other declassified materials from the same era. When cross-referenced with independent accounts and testimonies from former participants, a pattern emerges that cannot be easily dismissed as mere paranoia or conspiracy theory. The consistency of the data, even if some of it is hyperbolic, suggests that a serious, systematic effort was indeed made to explore the boundaries of mind control and cognitive manipulation. Another layer of complexity in the document is its reference to multi-agency collaboration. While MKUltra is most commonly associated with the CIA, the FBI document indicates that several other government agencies were involved in similar experiments, or at least in monitoring the developments. This interagency involvement implies that the techniques explored under MKUltra were not isolated to one branch of government, but were part of a broader, coordinated effort. The document cites instances where information was shared between agencies and where joint operations were conducted to further the research. This raises questions about accountability and oversight. If multiple agencies were complicit, then how many eyes were really watching to prevent abuse? The diffusion of responsibility in such scenarios can often lead to a dangerous, "it's not my department" mentality, where ethical boundaries are blurred and the end justifies the means. The FBI document also takes a speculative turn when it discusses the potential for adaptive countermeasures. In other words, it acknowledges that while the experiments were designed to break down a subject's mental defenses, there were instances where the human mind adapted in unexpected ways, sometimes resisting the imposed changes. This phenomenon of mental resilience is not fully understood, and the document speculates that it might be possible to develop techniques to counteract mind control methods, either by bolstering an individual's natural defenses or by reversing the effects of cognitive reprogramming. The idea that the human mind could fight back, even when subjected to these extreme measures, offers a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim narrative. However, the document is careful to note that these adaptive responses varied greatly from person to person, and in some cases, the damage was irreversible. A particularly intriguing aspect of the document is its discussion on the long-term consequences of these experiments. While many of the techniques were initially tested for their immediate effects, the document notes that follow-up studies were conducted to assess the lasting impact on subjects. Some of these follow-ups revealed that individuals who had undergone intense mind control experiments experienced persistent psychological issues, ranging from chronic anxiety and depression to dissociative disorders and memory impairments. The language here is clinical, but the human cost is unmistakable. The document does not shy away from detailing how these experiments, which were once considered cutting-edge science, ended up inflicting long-term harm on unsuspecting citizens. This serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of power over the human mind can have devastating consequences that ripple out for decades. Moreover, the FBI document delves into the theoretical underpinnings of these experiments, linking them to emerging ideas in quantum mechanics and energy theory. While the language might seem esoteric, the basic premise is that the human mind could be influenced by external energy fields, whether through electromagnetic pulses, chemical agents, or even subtle manipulations of sensory input. The document hints at a vision of the future where the boundary between physical and mental realms is increasingly porous, and where advances in technology might make it even easier to manipulate human thought. Although much of this remains speculative, it underscores the fact that the research wasn't just about immediate applications, it was about understanding the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. The FBI document, in this light, is as much a philosophical treatise as it is a technical report, challenging us to rethink what it means to be in control of our own minds. Throughout the document, there is a pervasive tone of both scientific curiosity and ethical ambivalence. On one hand, the researchers involved were driven by a genuine desire to understand the intricacies of human consciousness. They sought to uncover the secrets of the mind, to push beyond the limits of conventional psychology, and to explore the untapped potential that lay hidden within each of us. On the other hand, this same drive led them down a path fraught with moral peril, one where the rights of individuals were sacrificed on the altar of national security. The document serves as a testament to this duality. It is both an account of groundbreaking research and a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition. One cannot overlook the broader implications of the FBI document for our modern understanding of mind control. In today's digital age, when information is manipulated, personal data is commodified, and social media platforms can subtly shape public opinion. The questions raised by this document are more relevant than ever. The techniques described, once the domain of secret experiments, now have echoes in the realm of digital manipulation and psychological warfare. Advertisers, political campaigners, and even rogue state actors use methods that, in many ways, mirror the experiments detailed in the document. The idea that our thoughts can be influenced by carefully curated stimuli, be it through targeted advertising or algorithm-driven news feeds, is a modern-day extension of the same principles explored decades ago. In this context, the FBI document is not just a relic of a bygone era, it's a warning sign for the future. The authenticity of the document itself has not gone without scrutiny. Skeptics have long questioned whether the file might have been altered or whether its contents have been taken out of context. However, when cross-referenced with other declassified records and independent testimonies from former operatives and subjects, a consistent narrative emerges. The details, though sometimes couched in technical jargon, resonate with known accounts of MKUltra and other mind control experiments. While some may argue that the document's more sensational claims are exaggerated, the overall pattern is undeniable. A systematic, government-sanctioned effort to manipulate and control the human mind was very much real. This convergence of evidence lends the document a credibility that is hard to ignore, even for those who might prefer to dismiss such ideas as mere conspiracy theories. In closing, the FBI document is a multifaceted artifact, a window into a dark chapter of government experimentation, and a mirror reflecting our deepest fears about autonomy and control. It challenges us to ask hard questions. How much of our thought is truly our own? To what extent can external forces reshape our identity without our consent? And perhaps most chillingly, what safeguards are in place today to prevent a recurrence of these unethical experiments? The answers to these questions remain as elusive as the document's origins. But one thing is clear. The revelations contained within this file are not just a matter of historical record. They are a call to vigilance. As we continue to navigate a world where technology and information are in constant flux, the legacy of these experiments serves as a stark reminder of the power that lies in controlling the human mind. It urges us to demand transparency, to uphold ethical standards in scientific research, and to always remain alert to the subtle forces that might one day seek to shape our very thoughts. In essence, the FBI document is a powerful testament to the complexities of human consciousness and the dangerous allure of mind control. Its pages tell a story of ambition, of scientific exploration taken too far, and of the tragic human cost that often accompanies such endeavors. And while we may never fully unravel all the secrets it holds, Its existence alone challenges us to remain ever critical of the forces that seek to influence us, both from without and from within. Imagine for a moment that your mind isn't as inviolable as you think. What if every thought, emotion, or reaction you have can be shifted, molded, or even completely rewritten by external influences? The idea sounds like something pulled straight from a sci-fi thriller, yet modern science is beginning to reveal just how malleable our minds can be. In this section, we're going to unpack the science behind mind control, exploring how our brains work, what happens when they're influenced by external forces, and why some techniques that once sounded like the stuff of conspiracy theories are now gaining traction in scientific research. At its core, the concept of mind control is about understanding, and in some cases, altering the way our brains process information. The human brain is an extraordinarily complex organ. It's made up of billions of neurons that communicate through electrical and chemical signals. These signals form the basis of every thought, memory, and emotion. Scientists have long known that the brain isn't a static structure. It's dynamic and continually reshaped by experience. This phenomenon, known as neuroplasticity, tells us that our brains are like clay, constantly being molded by the things we do, see, and feel. Neuroplasticity offers the first clue into how mind control might work. If our brains can rewire themselves based on new experiences, then it stands to reason that, under the right conditions, external factors could guide or alter that rewiring process. Researchers have discovered that when a person is exposed to repetitive or powerful stimuli, their neural pathways can shift. This is why habits form, why traumatic events leave lasting impressions, and why learning a new skill can physically change your brain. In the realm of mind control, the idea is to harness this natural adaptability and steer it in a direction that serves a specific purpose, whether that's making someone more open to suggestion, altering their behavior, or even implanting new ideas. One of the most well-known methods for influencing the brain is through the use of chemical agents. Psychoactive substances such as LSD, psilocybin, and other hallucinogens work by disrupting the normal flow of neurotransmitters in the brain. These chemicals alter the balance of chemicals like serotonin and dopamine, which are crucial for mood regulation, perception, and cognition. When these substances are introduced into the brain, they can produce a range of effects, from profound euphoria and altered states of awareness to confusion and even long-term psychological changes. During the Cold War era, programs like MK Ultra explored the possibility of using these drugs to break down a person's mental defenses. The idea was that by altering brain chemistry, researchers could temporarily dismantle the barriers that normally protect our minds from unwanted influences. But the influence of chemicals isn't the whole story. Sensory input plays an equally important role in shaping our perceptions. Our brains are constantly bombarded by stimuli from the world around us: sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. Under normal circumstances, the brain filters and processes this information, allowing us to focus on what's important while ignoring background noise. However, if you dramatically alter the sensory environment, you can change how the brain perceives reality. This is the principle behind sensory deprivation and overload techniques. Take sensory deprivation, for instance. When a person is placed in an environment devoid of light, sound, or other stimuli, the brain starts to compensate. In the absence of external inputs, the mind may begin to create its own sensations, leading to hallucinations or vivid internal experiences. This state of heightened internal focus makes the mind more suggestible because it's not busy processing external information. Conversely, sensory overload, where too much stimulation is provided, can also disrupt normal brain functions. The brain, overwhelmed by excessive inputs, may become disoriented and lose its ability to distinguish between important signals and irrelevant noise. Both of these conditions, deprivation and overload, can render the mind more malleable and open to external suggestions, setting the stage for what some call state-induced suggestibility. Another key aspect of the science behind mind control is the role of altered states of consciousness. These are states in which the normal functioning of the brain is significantly altered, whether through meditation, hypnosis, or the use of psychoactive drugs. In these states, the boundaries between the conscious and subconscious mind can blur. Hypnosis, for example, is a well-known technique where an individual is guided into a trance-like state. In this state, their critical thinking is temporarily bypassed, making it easier to introduce suggestions that may later influence their behavior. While hypnosis is often portrayed as a party trick or entertainment, its roots lie in serious research into how the brain processes suggestion. In a hypnotic state, the brain may temporarily shift from its usual patterns of activity, opening a window during which long-held beliefs or behaviors can be modified. Meditation and mindfulness practices offer another perspective on altered states of consciousness. Although these practices are typically associated with stress relief and spiritual growth, they also reveal fascinating insights into how the brain works. When we meditate, we often experience a quieting of the mind, a reduction in the chatter of everyday thoughts. This calm state can increase awareness of internal processes and sometimes even allow us to access deeper layers of consciousness. Scientists have found that regular meditation can change the brain structure and function, enhancing areas associated with focus, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. While meditation is usually a self-directed practice aimed at personal growth, the underlying science shows that it can fundamentally alter neural pathways. In the context of mind control, similar principles are at play, except the goal isn't self-improvement, but rather the external manipulation of those pathways. Yet, another intriguing field that touches on the science of mind control is that of quantum physics and energy theory. At first glance, quantum physics might seem entirely removed from the discussion of brain function. But some researchers have proposed that the brain might operate on principles that echo those found in the quantum realm. The idea here is that just as particles in the quantum field exist in a state of probability until observed, our thoughts and perceptions might be influenced by energy fields that we have yet to fully understand. This perspective is highly speculative, but it adds a layer of mystery to the conversation. Some theorists argue that if our brains are connected to a broader, universal field of energy, then subtle manipulations of that field could, in theory, influence our mental states. While this idea remains on the fringes of mainstream science, it captures the imagination and suggests that the boundaries between science fiction and reality are not always clear-cut. So, what does all this mean for the idea of mind control? Essentially, it paints a picture of a brain that is highly adaptable, constantly shaped by both internal processes and external influences. The same qualities that allow us to learn, grow, and adapt also make us vulnerable to manipulation. Our minds are not isolated fortresses, but rather dynamic networks that can be reconfigured, sometimes with deliberate intent. When the right combination of chemical, sensory, and psychological techniques is applied, the result can be a significant alteration in how a person thinks, feels, or behaves. Consider the implications of what we've discussed so far. If a combination of drugs, sensory manipulation, and altered states of consciousness can make the brain more open to suggestion, then it becomes conceivable that these methods could be used to implant ideas, modify memories, or even change personality traits. This isn't just about causing temporary confusion or disorientation. It's about fundamentally altering the architecture of the mind. And while many of these ideas were once considered purely theoretical or the stuff of dystopian fiction, decades of research, from Cold War-era experiments to modern studies in neuroplasticity, suggest that the possibility is not entirely far-fetched. The science behind mind control also delves into the concept of cognitive reprogramming. This is the idea that, through repeated interventions, it might be possible to create lasting changes in the brain's wiring. Think of it like updating the software on a computer. The brain's programming, its ingrained habits, beliefs, and responses, can be rewritten if the right inputs are applied consistently over time. Researchers have seen this effect in therapies designed to treat mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, where cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps patients change negative thought patterns. In a more extreme form, however, the goal of cognitive reprogramming in the context of mind control would be to overwrite or suppress existing behaviors and instill entirely new ones. Of course, the idea of reprogramming the human mind raises enormous ethical questions. Who gets to decide which thoughts are good or bad? Who has the right to alter someone's personality or behavior? And what safeguards should be in place to protect individuals from being manipulated against their will? These are not just theoretical concerns. They're questions that researchers, policymakers, and the public must grapple with as science advances and as the methods for influencing the brain become more sophisticated. In recent years, new technologies have emerged that could potentially extend the reach of mind control techniques even further. Advances in neuroimaging and brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, have given scientists unprecedented insight into the inner workings of the brain. With devices that can monitor neural activity in real time, researchers are now able to see how the brain responds to different stimuli and even to influence that activity directly. For example, transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, uses magnetic fields to stimulate nerve cells in the brain. While TMS is currently used as a treatment for depression and other neurological disorders, it also demonstrates that external devices can modulate brain activity in predictable ways. As these technologies develop, the line between therapeutic intervention and potential manipulation may become increasingly blurred. Another emerging area is the field of digital manipulation. In our interconnected world, where our personal data and online behavior are constantly monitored, there is growing concern about how digital platforms might influence our thoughts and actions. Algorithms that curate the news we see, the advertisements we encounter, and even the content we engage with on social media can subtly shape our perceptions and beliefs over time. Although this isn't mind control in the traditional sense, it operates on similar principles, using targeted inputs to nudge our thoughts and behaviors in a desired direction. The overlap between digital influence and traditional mind control techniques highlights how multifaceted the challenge of protecting our autonomy can be. Throughout all of this, one recurring theme is the incredible adaptability of the human brain. While this plasticity is what enables learning and creativity, it also means that our mental defenses can be compromised under the right conditions. In controlled experiments, scientists have demonstrated that under specific circumstances, whether through chemical means, sensory manipulation, or psychological conditioning, the brain can be coerced into forming new neural connections, or even erasing old ones. These findings are both awe-inspiring and unsettling. They show that the human mind, for all its complexity and resilience, is not impervious to change. In summary, the science behind mind control is as multifaceted as it is controversial. It spans the realms of neuroplasticity, psychoactive chemistry, sensory perception, and even the speculative frontiers of quantum theory. The same processes that allow us to adapt, learn, and heal also render us vulnerable to external manipulation. Techniques that once seemed like the realm of science fiction are now being studied in earnest, not only to understand the full potential of the human mind, but also to develop new treatments for mental health conditions. Yet, as we unlock the secrets of the brain, we must also confront the ethical implications of our discoveries. The potential for abuse is enormous, and history has shown that the line between healing and harm can be alarmingly thin. The research into mind control challenges us to think critically about free will, personal autonomy, and the responsibilities of those who hold the keys to our mental realms. Ultimately, exploring the science behind mind control is not just an academic exercise. It's a journey into understanding what makes us human. It invites us to question the boundaries of our consciousness and to remain vigilant against forces that might one day seek to shape our very thoughts. As we continue to advance technologically and scientifically, the lessons we learn about the brain's adaptability must be matched by an unwavering commitment to ethical principles and personal freedom. And so, the science behind mind control stands as a powerful reminder. While our minds are incredibly capable and ever-evolving, they are also delicate and susceptible to manipulation. In a world where the tools for influencing thought are growing ever more sophisticated, it is up to all of us to safeguard the sanctity of our inner lives and to never stop questioning the forces that seek to define who we are. When you start peeling back the layers of these experiments, it quickly becomes clear that the methods for mind control were as diverse as they were alarming. Researchers explored an array of techniques, each designed to tweak the human mind in a different way. From drugs to sensory overloads, every tool in the experimental kit was aimed at finding the most effective way to control thought and behavior. One of the most infamous methods was the use of chemical agents, most notably LSD. In the early days of MKUltra, LSD was seen as a miracle drug with the potential to unlock hidden parts of the brain. Instead of the guided therapeutic use we sometimes hear about today, researchers at the time administered it in high doses, often without the subject's knowledge. The goal was to see if they could break down the barriers of consciousness and implant new ideas or even erase memories. The effects were unpredictable, sometimes leaving subjects in states of confusion, terror, or even long-lasting psychological damage. Another method was sensory manipulation. This wasn't just about depriving someone of sensory input, but also about bombarding them with stimuli in controlled ways. By isolating or overloading the senses, researchers could induce altered states of consciousness. The idea was that in these altered states, the mind becomes more malleable, more willing to accept new ideas or discard old ones. It's similar to how, when you're extremely tired or stressed, you might start to question your own perceptions or memories. In a lab setting, these techniques were taken to the extreme. Hypnosis and other psychological conditioning methods also played a crucial role. The theory behind hypnosis is that when a person is in a deeply relaxed state, their subconscious mind becomes more accessible. This opened up the possibility of implanting suggestions that could change behavior long after the session was over. Whether it was to make someone more compliant, to erase traumatic memories, or even to create entirely new ones. The potential for mind control through hypnosis was both terrifying and fascinating. And it wasn't just about inducing a trance. Researchers experimented with techniques to maintain that state of vulnerability over long periods. Technological advancements also started to creep into the mix. As computers and neuroimaging became more sophisticated, there was a growing interest in understanding how technology could enhance, or even replace, traditional methods of mind control. Early research into neurostimulation, for example, looked at ways to directly influence brainwaves and neural activity. While this technology was in its infancy back then, it set the stage for modern developments that some argue are a direct descendant of those early experiments. Today, as we see the rise of digital manipulation and even discussions about brain-computer interfaces, it's hard not to draw a line back to those early secretive experiments. These techniques were not used in isolation. Rather, they were often combined to amplify their effects. Imagine a scenario where a subject is given a powerful hallucinogen, then placed in an environment of controlled sensory overload, and finally subjected to hypnotic suggestion. Each element would intensify the others, creating a cocktail of manipulation that could fundamentally alter a person's perception of reality. And while the results of these experiments varied wildly, the overarching theme was clear. The human mind is not a fortress. With the right combination of techniques, it can be opened, reprogrammed, and controlled. When it comes to the effects of these mind control experiments, The real-world impact is where things get truly unsettling. Over the years, we've seen accounts from individuals who claim to have been affected by these techniques. Some of these stories come from people who underwent experiments without ever knowing it, while others are from those who willingly participated in what they believed was a path to enlightenment, only to be caught in a web of manipulation. One of the most talked about aspects of MKUltra is the use of unwitting subjects. In many cases, individuals were exposed to these experiments without their informed consent. Stories abound of college students, military personnel, and even everyday citizens who found themselves caught in the crossfire of secret research projects. These personal testimonies paint a picture of a program that wasn't just an abstract set of experiments. It was a series of real-life events that left lasting scars on those involved. The FBI document adds weight to these accounts, suggesting that the techniques developed in MKUltra were more widespread than previously thought. Media portrayals have played a big role in shaping public perception of these events. From movies to documentaries, the narrative of government mind control has captured the imagination of audiences around the world. While some of these depictions are dramatized for effect, they often draw on kernels of truth from declassified documents and personal testimonies. Whether it's the idea of a government that can rewire your brain or the notion that you're never truly in control of your own thoughts, these stories resonate because they tap into a deep-seated fear of losing one's autonomy. One particularly striking case involved a series of experiments where subjects reported experiencing vivid hallucinations and intense emotional shifts after being dosed with LSD. In some instances, these effects lasted long after the initial exposure, leaving individuals with a sense of disorientation and loss of identity. Other accounts describe how sensory deprivation and extreme isolation led to states of profound psychological vulnerability, where even simple suggestions could radically alter a person's behavior. These are not just isolated incidents, they are part of a larger pattern that suggests a systematic effort to probe and potentially exploit the vulnerabilities of the human mind. The impact of these experiments is still felt today. For many, the legacy of MKUltra serves as a stark reminder of the potential for abuse when science and government power collide. The revelations from the FBI document have reignited debates about the ethical boundaries of research, raising questions about how much control authorities should have over our minds. Even if some of the more extreme claims turn out to be exaggerated, the fact remains that our mental autonomy has been, and perhaps continues to be, under constant threat from those who seek to exploit it. One of the most fascinating, and perhaps unsettling aspects of all this is how it brings together seemingly disparate realms: government secrecy, cutting-edge science, and ancient spiritual ideas. At first glance, these might seem like completely different worlds, but when you start looking closer, you see that they're all grappling with the same fundamental questions. What is the nature of consciousness? How can our minds shape our reality? And just how far can you push the boundaries of human perception? In many ways, the research behind MKUltra was ahead of its time. While today we talk about neuroplasticity and quantum theories of consciousness, back then, the idea that you could alter the brain's wiring through external interventions was revolutionary. Some of the techniques explored during MKUltra, like sensory manipulation and controlled hallucinations, share surprising similarities with practices found in ancient spiritual traditions. Think about meditation, shamanic rituals, or even the intense focus achieved by yogis. All of these practices involve altering one's state of mind, tuning into deeper layers of consciousness, and in some cases, accessing realities beyond ordinary perception. The FBI document, we're examining hints at this convergence. It suggests that the methods used to control the mind were not solely based on brute force scientific experiments, but also on subtle techniques that have long been part of spiritual practices. By inducing altered states of consciousness, whether through chemical means or sensory manipulation, the researchers were, in effect, tapping into a universal field of energy that many ancient traditions have long recognized. In a way, the government was trying to replicate and control what spiritual practitioners have been doing for thousands of years, harnessing the power of the mind to reshape reality. This convergence of ideas has a powerful impact on how we view the world. On one hand, it lends a kind of scientific legitimacy to concepts that were once considered purely mystical or supernatural. On the other hand, it raises uncomfortable questions about where the line should be drawn. If governments can tap into the same forces that have been revered in spiritual traditions, what does that say about our own potential for transformation, and more worryingly, for manipulation? For many, the idea that the government could use such techniques to control the mind is both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It forces us to confront the possibility that our perceptions, our thoughts, and even our emotions might not be as free as we once believed. When you start to see the connections between cutting-edge neuroscience, government experiments, and ancient spiritual wisdom, it becomes clear that the story of mind control isn't just about science. It's about power, belief, and the very nature of reality itself. It's time to step back and ask some hard questions. With all the wild claims and eye-popping revelations about MK Ultra and mind control, how much of it is fact and how much is pure fiction? In the age of the internet, where conspiracy theories can spread like wildfire, it's important to separate the wheat from the chaff. There are plenty of myths swirling around these topics. Some suggest that mind control techniques have been perfected to the point where governments can completely erase or rewrite a person's identity at will. Others claim that these methods are being used on a large scale today, right under our noses, to control public opinion and behavior. While these ideas make for gripping stories, the reality is a bit more nuanced. The FBI document we're discussing provides concrete evidence of experimentation, but it doesn't necessarily prove that these techniques have been perfected or that they're in widespread use. Instead, it serves as a reminder of just how vulnerable the human mind can be under extreme conditions. Experts from various fields, historians, psychologists, neuroscientists, offer differing opinions on the legacy of MK Ultra. Some see it as a dark chapter in scientific research, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and unethical experimentation. Others argue that while the experiments were indeed troubling, the sensationalism surrounding them has often overshadowed the more mundane reality of what was achieved, and, importantly, what was never achieved. The debate is ongoing, and the truth likely lies somewhere in between the extremes. One of the key takeaways from this discussion is the importance of critical thinking and media literacy. In a world where sensational headlines can blur the lines between fact and fiction, it's up to us to question the sources of our information and to seek out verified, credible accounts. Yes, the idea of government mind control is both fascinating and frightening, but it's crucial to ground our understanding in real evidence, even as we acknowledge that some aspects of the story may be more speculative than others. While it's easy to get swept up in dramatic claims, the real lesson here is about the balance between skepticism and open-mindedness. The revelations of MK Ultra and the FBI document should not be dismissed as mere conspiracy fodder, nor should they be accepted uncritically. Instead, they invite us to ask deeper questions about the nature of power, the ethics of scientific research, and the limits of human freedom. Given all that we've discussed, it's natural to wonder, if our minds are potentially vulnerable to such manipulation, what can we do to protect ourselves? The good news is that there are practical strategies you can adopt to keep your mind sharp and less susceptible to external influences. One of the simplest yet most effective methods is to practice mindfulness. Taking time each day to clear your mind through meditation or simple breathing exercises can help you maintain control over your thoughts. When you're mindful, you're more aware of your inner dialogue, making it harder for outside forces to shape your perceptions without you noticing. Another important strategy is to cultivate a healthy skepticism. This doesn't mean rejecting everything you hear, but rather taking the time to research, question, and critically evaluate new information. In today's digital age, where misinformation can spread rapidly, learning to discern reliable sources from sensationalized hype is essential. Stay informed by reading widely from multiple sources, and always be open to having your views challenged by credible evidence. It's also important to engage in activities that stimulate your brain and encourage independent thinking. Whether it's reading a good book, engaging in thoughtful conversations, or even challenging yourself with puzzles and games, keeping your brain active and engaged is a great defense against mental manipulation. A well-informed, active mind is less likely to fall prey to simple narratives or unverified claims. Finally, building a community of like-minded individuals can provide a strong support network. Sharing ideas, debating theories, and exploring complex topics together not only broadens your perspective, but also helps to reinforce your own understanding. When you're part of a community that values critical thinking and open dialogue, you're less likely to be swayed by sensationalist claims or manipulative tactics. In the end, the story of MKUltra, the FBI document, and the broader realm of mind control is a complex, multifaceted tale that challenges everything we think we know about our own minds. It's a story that forces us to confront the possibility that the forces shaping our thoughts and perceptions might be far more powerful and more insidious than we ever imagined. We've taken a journey through the dark corridors of Cold War-era experiments, peered into the secretive world of government research, and examined the science behind how our minds can be manipulated. Along the way, we've explored unsettling accounts, debated the veracity of sensational claims, and even discovered practical steps to help safeguard our mental autonomy. While the truth about MKUltra and mind control might forever remain partially shrouded in mystery, one thing is clear. The quest for understanding the human mind is as relevant today as it was decades ago. Whether it's through ancient spiritual practices or cutting-edge neuroscience, the potential to unlock, and perhaps even control, the power of our consciousness is a double-edged sword. With great power comes great responsibility, and it's up to each of us to remain vigilant and informed. So as we close this chapter, remember that knowledge is your best defense. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and above all, keep your mind free. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the depths of government secrets and the untapped potential of the human mind. If this exploration has sparked even a hint of curiosity, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay aware, stay empowered, and never stop questioning the world around you.